Good evening, everyone. This is our initial class that I would like to actually introduce the class properly and level set with everyone. So I'd like to congratulate everyone for making the time and thank you. And really making the decision to want to learn biblical Hebrew. That's the class that we are going in. However, we are not here to become language experts. Our entire motivation of learning biblical Hebrew is actually to study the Bible. And that would be our primary focus. And so our class will be very different from other Hebrew classes because our end goal is so that we can actually do two things. Let me just put it on the screen. One, we want to be able to parse, and that's a big word, and that is to translate. And number two, that is the essentially the main purpose, which is to exegete. Another big word, but this is to explain. What this means is by the end of our course, we will learn enough Hebrew to actually study the Hebrew text of the Bible. And we will continue into a Hebrew text Bible study. That's where you would put all that you have learned, and together we will then take apart verse by verse, chapter by chapter of specific passages, even familiar passages, so that you can actually translate it yourself. You will be surprised how easy it is to translate now. To do it in a way where it is consistent and it is elaborate enough for you to explain, I will show you all the techniques. There are shortcuts to doing some of these things, but that will come in a later stage. In this stage of learning biblical Hebrew, you must bear in mind that biblical Hebrew is a new language. Some of you may have learned biblical Hebrew before somewhere else. You may have learned how to read, you may have learned to write somewhat, you may have even learned to read some of the Hebrew text. But I want you to realize that all of that is our journey, is part of our journey to studying the Bible. Yes, we will learn new letters, which I will introduce to you. Yes, we will learn how to read very, very quickly. We will learn how to read. But our interest is not to read and write, our interest is to listen. Our interest is to understand. And so, our class in biblical Hebrew is not for you to read all kinds of passages, but we will deal with passages. We're not here to read books. What you get as our class material, the slides and the books that you get, that will be more than sufficient. Now, if you have other textbooks, great. But I would urge you not to confuse yourself by going to try out different videos on YouTube. Not just yet, not until you are familiar in a particular way of understanding Hebrew. Now, I want to show you why we are different. We are different because this is an adult class. Now, there is a difference between an adult class and a children's class. The way that an adult learn is very different from a child. We are not here to force any memorization, but it will be good that if we can remember what we have learned. But it is important, number one, take notes. Take lots of notes. Even when you don't understand, put a mark next to your notes and then say, I need to follow up with this later on because I don't understand. Very important because you're adults. You shouldn't be afraid to ask questions. There is no such thing called a stupid question. Let me give an example. Some people may wonder, why is there a dot in the letter? You will be surprised. Everything in Hebrew has a meaning. The dot is not a dirt on the screen, it is a dot. And it is fair to ask all of these questions. Why is there a dash? Why do you put a dot there? Why does it sound this way? Why not that way? Why can't we understand it this way? And so that is what we mean by an adult class. It means that we are here to focus on understanding. I am assuming that all of us are starting from zero. Even if you're not starting from zero, I will assume that you are starting from zero because it is important for you to relearn some of the basics. If you had learned it from books, you would find this a bit easier than others. Now, I have designed this class because I've attended so many in my lifetime that I found no one to be focused on helping adults learn. Now, when I say adults learning, I would assume that you are somewhat like me, that I can't remember things very well. And it takes me a little bit of going through my notes, looking through things uh, many, many times before I get familiar with it. I can't remember vocabulary, and that is a bummer because it's very hard for me to learn things that way. And so we will be using the Interlinear Bible app later on. But more importantly, is we need understanding. If we understand, then we can parse and explain. A child learning Hebrew is not designed for him to parse and to explain the Bible text. It's for a person to learn Hebrew to chit chat. Our interest here is not for you to learn Hebrew to go to Israel to speak biblical Hebrew because they don't speak biblical Hebrew. They speak modern Hebrew in on the streets. And so just bear in mind our interest here is not to go around speaking Hebrew. Our interest here is to understand what we read and what we hear so that we can explain what the Bible text says. Now, I want to assure you that by the time you actually learn some of these things, that you will eventually give up on your English translated Bibles because you would be able to explain the Bible text much better than your English translations. Now, along the way, we will have a few milestones. These milestones are important because the milestones will tell you where we are along the course of about 38 weeks. That's not very long to think about it. It's less time to have a baby. But these 38 weeks is only 1 hour or less per week. We will never exceed the hour because some of you may have other things to do as well. And revising a long video is very difficult. And so I would urge you that when you review the videos later, to fast forward to where you need things to be recalled, right? So you don't need to review the entire video all the time. Just review what you need. Now, if you don't have time this week, do it next week. So milestones will be this. We will learn the alphabet. And by learning the alphabet, we will learn to look at it, be familiar with it, be able to uh, know the names of every alphabet, and to be able to write the alphabet. Now that's a milestone. We will want to be able to read. Now, by reading, I mean make the sounds. Now, some of you may have listened to, um, say, a non Chinese speaker singing Chinese songs. And you know for sure that singer doesn't understand a single word that she is singing, but she is singing it in perfect Chinese intonation. Now, that is what I mean by being able to make the sounds, which is very similar and fairly accurate, but you may not have any idea what you're reading. That is what I mean by reading. You're able to read the text, but you may not be able to understand what you read. Now, that's sounds. Now, what we want to do thereafter would be grammar. That would be a larger part of the course. But in grammar, we only want to know enough to be able to use an interlinear Bible app and understand all the grammar that will appear in the Bible at least 80 to 90% of the time. That 5 to 10% of the time, we will have to struggle a little bit because once a while we will encounter some difficulty in biblical Hebrew, which we have never covered, but that's okay. That's only a very, very small percentage of the time. We will have covered 90 over percent of what is needed to study the Bible. Hence, with the aid of an interlinear Bible app, we will be able to manage quite well. Initially, we struggle a little bit, but later on, we'll be fine. Now, I want to highlight something to you as a requirement. There are no exams. There are no homework that needs to be filled and handed in. You will be given on a weekly basis a list of words. And for those of you who are more hardworking, they become your vocabulary. For those of you who are less hardworking, I will ask you to learn how to read them. For those of you who are not hardworking at all, please look at them. You need to spend at least 15 minutes every day. Look at your notes. Look at the book that you'll be receiving. If you are not receiving, you look at the PDFs. Uh, look at it, especially if you don't have a background in Hebrew. Because it is a new language, much of what you are going to see will be new to your eyes. You need to spend at least 15 minutes every day. I am asking you, pleading with you. Why? Because you cannot afford to come back the next week as if nothing had happened. We will be moving on class after class after class because it is a progression. We don't move backwards, we move forwards. And so you need to be familiar. Now, you may not be able to follow everything in every class, that's fine. But as long as you understand and your eyes, that's what I'm asking you to do. Your eyes must be familiar with this foreign writing. Your ears must be familiar with the foreign sounds. It is absolutely important that you actually spend 15 minutes a day. If not, you will struggle. Now, I am also of the understanding that if you are much like me, I would need a little bit more time than 1 hour a week of class to learn. And so you have access to the video. So during the course of the week, maybe on a weekend, maybe one a night, you just watch what you need just to be familiar with it. The videos will be made available to you and you can watch it anytime you want. But they are private. That means you can't share them. So nobody else can help you except yourselves and me. So if you have any questions, please field it to me either personally or in the chat group. Now, the other thing that you need to really understand is that as time goes on, I will also be starting new Hebrew classes. And it would be at least 10 to easily 10 to 15 weeks down the road. And then you will be invited to attend those new classes if you need it. Because sometimes going through the course again helps, but whatever works for you. So I'm not giving you a foolproof formula because you are all adults. Our focus is that I assume that you will know what you need best. I am here to facilitate, to provide you with as much information, with as much opportunity to learn, with recorded videos and even new classes to attend. Now, this is class number 6, which means that I have done 5 previously. Number 5 is still ongoing, and the Hebrew Text Bible Study class has been going on for way more than 1.5 years. We have had students who had zero knowledge of Hebrew and have become, well, I would say, kind of an expert in being able to parse and understand the Hebrew text. So I am here to assure you that the style and the technique that I am putting in place works. Now, one more point I want to highlight to you is this. Some of the things that I am going to teach you are not found in books, but it is necessary to understand the Bible. Remember, our goal is to explain. To translate is a means to an end. To explain is the end in itself. You may be a personal Bible student, you may be a teacher, you may be a preacher, you may be a pastor, you may be a CG, it doesn't matter. As long as you have an interest to learn Hebrew, I can virtually guarantee you that this is a skill for life, that you will find that you can now be absolutely sure of what you are reading from the Hebrew text. And you don't have to agree with me. You just have to agree with yourself and be able to explain everything in the Hebrew text. And that, I am here to assure you, is very doable. Now, if you feel at any point in time that things are more difficult, bear with me. Why? Because in the area of understanding, we struggle sometimes because we fail to understand. And so please find time to look at what you don't understand and ask. Find out. Because once you understand, our job is done. Memorizing is not part of the requirement because most of us, I'm not saying all, most of us, if you're like me, will find it very hard to remember a lot of information. Those of you who can, kudos to you. Please go as far as you possibly can. But very important reminder is this. B, not only that you take notes, please understand what you have gone through. Make sure you can write it in your own words. If, say, a few weeks down the road, you forget, ask. It's okay. Please don't be embarrassed or feel shy. If you don't want to post it in the chat group, post it to me directly. And if I find that it is useful for everybody, I will post the answer to everyone as well. So understand. So when I say understand, you are not children. What I mean is when you look at the slides and you're not sure of something, ask. Please ask, because that is your only way to understand. My job is to give you all the answers that I can find for you. Most of the time, your questions will not find answers in any of the books because most of the books are not there to explain the why. Our job here in this course is to explain the why so that in the years to come, you will always understand and be able to explain. That is the intent of the course. Now, let me, by way of introduction, show you some of the concepts that I hope that you will be able to appreciate. Biblical Hebrew is a very intelligent language. You may not think so today, but I assure you that you will agree with me as time goes on. When I say time goes on, I would say no more than 10 lessons down, when you're able to read, you will understand why I say that Biblical Hebrew is very intelligent, if not the most intelligent of the languages. Biblical Hebrew doesn't waste words. Biblical Hebrew does not waste sounds. And Biblical Hebrew can actually have your subject, verb, and object all in one word. Now, we will learn all of these things, and I'll show you why so that you understand to remember. Now, Biblical Hebrew is it's something that we can easily grasp if we have more language knowledge beyond English. So let me explain myself. Biblical Hebrew takes the best of English. The reason why it takes the best of English is that English has grammar. Now, of course, other languages have grammar, but English grammar is fairly extensive. And if you have a good grasp of English, it will help you go a long way. If you don't have a good grasp of English, you will move a little slower. But it is important for you to understand what I say about grammar. And I'll be using the simplest of terminology. Now, grammar means there is concepts of distance, time, state, uh, words which are prefix, which are suffix, and all of these are concepts of the best of English. Now, what English is not good in is the sounds. And so if you know Malay or some language which is similar to Malay, let me put it here, the best of Malay. If you happen to know Malay, if you don't know Malay, don't worry about it. I'm just giving an example. The best of Malay would be the rigidity of sounds. You see, Malay language has a very rigid way of making sounds, or what we call syllables. And the Malay language doesn't change. When you add a sound to it, the sound is just added. When you add a sound to it and you look at the word, it will be pronounced exactly the way you look at the word. Now, like English, it's not quite the same, isn't it? Um, for example, we have the word chief, right? Chief, the ch sound is chief. You look at it, it's chief. And then you look at another word, and this is chef. Why? Because it's borrowed from French. So in the English language, looking at a word can can lead you to go nuts, really. Why? Because looking at a word doesn't mean it's pronounced that way. And that's why English is very difficult to learn if your background is Chinese. That is it's a very big challenge because you'll be trying to figure out what's the rule there. Why is the first one chief and the second one chef? It's completely different in its pronunciation, and that's to do with the history of the language. So I would say that the rigidity of the Malay language is what is needed in Hebrew. For example, this is a Malay word, membawa. It doesn't matter how you use the prefix mem, it is always mem. It will not be anything else but mem. When you have a ba bar, it will always be a bar, not a ba. So what is important that I want to highlight to you is that the biblical Hebrew sounds is very rigid. When I am teaching you the syllables and the sounds of the biblical Hebrew language, I am using the Tiberius phonology, I would say, the way that the Tiberian would actually speak. So I'm giving you the academic sound. So, like I said, we're not going to be Hebrew experts, so it doesn't matter. But as long as we get the idea, the rigidity of sounds is what you see, is what you get, and that's how you make the sound. That's the best of Malay. That's it. Now I would say that it is also the best of Chinese. Now, what is important in the best of Chinese is the imagery. The imagery and concepts of expressions. As you know, doesn't mean that if you don't know Chinese that you are at a loss. It doesn't mean that. I will teach you how to think Eastern because biblical Hebrew is an Eastern language. It is not a Western language, so we cannot learn Hebrew like we learn Greek. And so I say that it's the best of Chinese because if you are a Chinese speaker, you would know that two characters in Chinese can express a story because the choices of the characters and how it's written can is so rich that it can tell a story. And biblical Hebrew does exactly that. Ancient languages like Hebrew and Chinese originated as pictures, and we call them pictograms. The difference is this: Hebrew and Chinese always goes from right to left, like Russian, right? Right to left. And so the Hebrew language is different from the Chinese character in the sense that the Chinese character are made up of multiple parts and it gives you one concept. Each of these has a story to it, has a picture to it, and combined, it gives you a compound concept. That's Chinese. Chinese tells stories, tries to excite the imagination. Hebrew does that as well, except that Hebrew is lined up in a sequence. Because it is lined up in a sequence, it allows itself to borrow from the best of English. Because now I can have grammar built into the words. I could put sounds in front, sounds at the back. I can rejuggle the sounds. And sometimes some of these letters can disappear because of some rules. And because it is in a sequence, I now can do grammar and concept at the same time. So if you don't know Chinese, doesn't matter. I'll be introducing you to a lot of Eastern thinking. The best of Malay, because when you look at a Hebrew word with the symbol markings or the sound markings, we call the nikut, then you will be able to read within the next few weeks. You will be able to read. And read as you may not be able to understand. The best of Chinese is when you read the words and in the verses of the Hebrew Bible, you will be able to see a whole lot more than what you read in the English translation. Why? Because the English translation is translated to give you the gist, to have a good English style. It is precise, it is concise, but it is more concise than it is precise. They will give up on precision and they will focus on being concise so that you would want to read it in good English style. You would think that God had spoken English. And so what is important is you should always bear in mind that God had given his revelation in the biblical Hebrew language. And the biblical Hebrew language is not like English. It doesn't change its meaning from the first book to the last book of the Hebrew Bible. The meanings remain constant. Unlike the English language, for example, 50 years ago, the word gay meant happy, and today the word gay means homosexual. Biblical Hebrew doesn't evolve in its meaning. It is very ancient and very rich in its meaning, like the Chinese language, like many ancient languages. All right. Now, one more point is this. Besides the best of English, the best of Malay, the best of Chinese, I would also highlight that there is the best of Hebrew. There are uniqueness in this language that isn't found in any other languages. It's not found in English, it's not found in Malay, it's not found in Chinese. And this is where we will spend a little bit of time. Why? It's because the uniqueness of Hebrew will make or break our translation and our explanation of text. And so this is where I'm coming from with regards to teaching you biblical Hebrew. Many of the concepts are not found in textbooks. I'm not writing any textbooks. The books you have are actually the slides that I have used and built over the many years I've spent time on. And it's been prepared very nicely as a book that you can use for the course. And it will work well with your notes. But it is not a reading book. If you already know Hebrew, you'll probably be able to appreciate that a whole lot more. And so when you finish this entire course and you're so into wanting to learn advanced Hebrew, please go ahead because you will have enough base to go very far. And so with this, let me now introduce you to the Hebrew language. Today is not the first class, it is an introduction. So I just want to get your eyes familiar with biblical Hebrew. And the first thing that you need to know in any language would be the alphabet, or what we call the alphabet. Now, the alphabet is from Greek, alpha, beta. We call the Hebrew letters the aleph bet because that's the first two letters of the letters of the Hebrew language, the aleph and the bet. Now, one more thing before we get into the aleph bet is this. Now, the one point that I forgot to make just now, just to help you understand, is this. If you are knowledgeable of other languages, and I would say these are your other languages: German, French, Greek. If you are familiar with some of these languages, then that will also be very useful indeed, right? But most of us here in Asia are not familiar with German, French, or Greek, and hence I will not be referring much to those languages at all. Now let's take a look at the alphabet. Now I have here memorized, so I would hope that you do. For this one, you need to memorize. Now, the only way I found that it helped me memorize is to learn a song. And that's a children's song. You know, when we were kids, we learned how to sing the ABC. So the alphabet also have a song, a really fun song. And so I will share that with you when we start the class. And that will help us when you sing the song long enough, you will know the flow of the alphabet. And before long, you will be remembering them. Now, when you look at this slide, and I call it the alphabet, it is very unusual because the writing that you have on the screen is what we call the Aramaic square script. The Aramaic square script. And so as we go through, I'll give you some of the history and some of the things that as an adult you would appreciate. Kids don't care what these scripts are. These are the scripts that were adopted after they went to Babylon in exile. And so the writing of the Hebrew people changed sometime during the exile. And so in the post-exilic period, they completely adopted this, what we call the Aramaic square script, because the script writing fits into a box, a square box, very much like those of you who learn to write Chinese. And so this Aramaic square script became the dominant way of writing, and the Paleo Hebrew, the one that has little stick figures, went out of use. Now, today, there is such a thing called Hebrew cursive. Hebrew cursive would be like simplified Chinese. When you look at simplified Chinese, you can still attempt to recognize the classic Chinese, but cursive Hebrew and Aramaic square script Hebrew is completely different. So we will only focus on the Aramaic square script because that is how the Bible is written and published. And so we will be needing everyone to spend 15 minutes a day going through your notes, but more so familiarize your eyes to things like this. No, these are little squiggly things that is on the screen, means nothing to you, but one of these sessions, we will be learning how to write them. And once you know how to write them, you will appreciate why the shapes are like that, how you can tell one from another. Why does some have dots and some don't have dots? Why some look like this and some look like this? But they are both mems. Why and why. You have a dot here, a dot there. And so all of this is important. So ask your questions when you are not familiar and you wonder whether you have misunderstood. It is important because these dots are not mistakes. There are no mistaken dots in Hebrew. If there is a mistake, it will be mine, not the Hebrew language. I might have typed something wrongly. But most importantly, you need to understand every dot and dash and mark in Hebrew has a meaning and a purpose. If it doesn't, it would not be there. So with this, I want you to follow me, and we will spend more time in our first lesson next week to understand the Aleph Bet. Spend your 15 minutes looking at this and reading it for yourself. Every letter has a name. The names are very important. The English alphabet has no name. It's A, B, C. It's just a sound, right? But the Aleph Bet has a name. Aleph, Bet, Vet, Gimel, Gimel, Dalet, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet, Yod, Kaf, Chaf, Chaf Sofit, Lamet, Mem, Mem Sofit, Nun, Nun Sofit, Samek, Ain, Pei, Fei, Fei Sofit, Tzadeh, Tzadeh Sofit, Kuf, Resh, Shin, Sin, Tav, Tav. Now, there are slight nuances in some of the pronunciation, and I will explain to you why and where and whether it's important or not. By way of introduction, you now have the names of all the alphabet that we will be using in the Bible. That is important. It's not because I like it, but it's used in the Bible and is used in various ways. And each of these letters have a purpose, how it forms sounds, and by sounds, it forms words, and how the sounds may change. Now, by way of introduction, I want to put out a warning as well as a encouragement. The Hebrew language has a way of changing its sound within a word when sounds are added to the front or the back or both. Let me repeat myself. In a Hebrew word, it has its own set of sounds, but it will change its sound if you have a sound put in front called the prefix or a sound put at the back called a suffix. It's similar in English context, isn't it? The front of a word, prefix, the back of a word, suffix. But more importantly, the Hebrew word goes from right to left. By this, the beginning of the word is here on the right-hand side. Hence, anything that is attached to the head or the front of a word is a prefix. But in the case of the Hebrew language, the prefix is always on the right-hand side. Now, this is a quick overview of Hebrew, level setting, giving you some expectation, encouraging what you what to do, write a lot of notes, ask a lot of questions. The more questions you have, the faster you will learn. You can make friends, you can work together. If you have learned Hebrew before, you will find that in many cases, you may find you don't understand why certain things are in a certain way. Please ask me. If I don't know, I'll find out. But because we are an adult class, understanding is paramount. It's primary, not memorizing. But for today and in the coming weeks, please try to memorize the alphabet, but not sitting down here and looking at it because you can stare at it for hours. It will boggle your mind. So later on, I will share a video on YouTube and you would learn how to sing along with it. And then once the tune catches on in your head, you'll be able to read the alphabet in no time. Now, with this, we come to the end of our introduction session. And I trust that you will want to continue and press on because this is a skill of a lifetime. It is not difficult. The most difficult language to learn on earth today is Chinese. One of the most difficult languages to learn on earth today is English. But one of the easiest language to learn today is Hebrew. Now, even though sometimes you find that, oh, it is a bit difficult, that's because we as adults don't have much time. We are trying to compress the entire course into 38 lessons. 1 hour and no more than an hour each. That's very little time to learn a brand new ancient language with the intent of studying the Bible. And many people have succeeded. If you press on, it will be very rewarding indeed. And so, with this, I urge you to hang on there and prepare to open up your mind to a brand new world of biblical Hebrew in a language which God used to expose his message to the Hebrew people in ancient times. And with this, we come to the end of our session tonight.